Welcome to the deep dive. Our goal, as always, is to really cut through the noise for you.
Stack up the sources, find out what matters.
Exactly. And today, we're looking at this, well, high-stakes diplomatic flurry around the war in Ukraine.
Right, you've got Trump, Putin, Zelensky, all in the mix. Things are moving fast.
They really are. So our mission today is to help you quickly get a handle on what's actually important, what's at stake here, especially with, meetings being agreed and these deadlines coming up fast.
Looming deadlines, yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The diplomatic dance, it seems, has kicked off.
Definitely.
The very latest is that U.S. President Trump and Russia's President Putin, they've agreed to meet. Soon. Coming days is this phrase.
And Trump sounds pretty optimistic, doesn't he? Talking about a good chance of a three-way summit.
Yeah, him, Putin, and Zelensky. Discussing ending the war very soon. That's quite a statement.
It is, and what's interesting is Zelensky's reaction. He was quick to show support, wasn't he?
On X, yeah. He said something like, real solutions are most effective at the leader level.
Which makes sense from his perspective. He also stressed, though, that they need to figure out the timing.
Right, the timing and what exactly they'll discuss. The agenda.
Exactly. But, contrast that enthusiasm with the Kremlin.
How so?
Well, their reaction was much more cautious. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov, he apparently noted the three-way summit idea was mentioned, but Russia left it without comment.
Okay, so not a firm yes on the three-way from Moscow yet.
Doesn't seem like it, but the Trump-Putin meeting itself, that seems solid.
The locations agreed?
Apparently so. Details coming later. And they've supposedly started working on the specifics.
Okay, so a bilateral meeting is definitely happening. The bigger summit is still a maybe, at least from Russia's side.
That seems to be the picture right now.
Now, this burst of activity, it doesn't come out of nowhere, does it? There's a history here.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's talk about the U.S. envoy, Steve Witkoff. He just met Putin in Moscow again. This was, his fifth visit, including this one?
That's right. Fourth previous, plus this latest one just before the meeting agreement.
So, does his involvement, his track record, give us any clues? What should we realistically expect?
Well, that's the key question, isn't it? Looking back, Witkoff's visits often followed a pattern.
Which was?
Optimism from Trump, often quite high. Then the talks happen, but ultimately...
no major breakthrough.
Exactly, no major breakthrough in peace talks. It's happened before.
That cycle of hope then, disappointment, it's important context.
It really is. It suggests that just having talks doesn't automatically mean progress.
And Trump himself even admitted that, right? Didn't he tell the BBC Putin had disappointed him?
He did, yeah, last month, after some earlier optimism following those previous visits.
So maybe that explains why Trump's tone seems a bit more, cautious now.
Possibly. He's saying things like, I don't call it a breakthrough.
Right, and we have been working at this for a long time. More grounded, perhaps.
Seems that way. Focusing on the human cost, too. Thousands of young people dying. And that line, I'm here to get the thing over with.
Feels quite direct. And the Russian side, what was their official line on Witkoff's visit?
Pretty vague, actually. The Kremlin's statement called the discussions constructive.
Yes, constructive.
Yeah, and mentioned that both sides exchanged signals, whatever that means.
Vague indeed.
Yeah.
But then you have the pictures, right? Russian outlets showed Putin and Witkoff smiling, shaking hands.
In a very grand, gilded hall at the Kremlin, yes.
So what do we make of that? Just diplomatic politeness? Or could that visual signal something more, even if the words don't?
That's the million-dollar question. It could just be optics, keeping up appearances, standard diplomacy. Or it could suggest that despite the caution, the channel is genuinely open and maybe less frosty than before, at least on a personal level between the negotiators.
So maintaining cordiality, even if the big issues are stuck?
Possibly. It's a subtle thing, but maybe significant given the lack of progress before. It shows they're willing to sit down and, smile for the cameras at least.
Okay, so we have these diplomatic moves, these meetings planned, but the big question hanging over it all is what's actually happening on the ground?
Right, because that's the reality check.
Especially with Trump's deadline. He gave Russia until Friday for a ceasefire or face more sweeping sanctions.
And that deadline is looming very large right now.
So are we seeing any signs of things calming down ahead of Friday?
Quite the opposite, unfortunately. Expectations for a settlement by Friday are described as muted.
Why is that?
Because Russia has kept up its large-scale air attacks on Ukraine right through this period of diplomatic talk and sanctions threats.
So the attacks continue despite the diplomacy and the deadline. That doesn't sound promising for Friday.
It really doesn't. It shows a clear disconnect between the talks and the military actions.
And the U.S. is applying pressure elsewhere too, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. Trump signed that executive order hitting Indian imports with a 25% tariff.
Because India keeps buying Russian oil.
Exactly. It's an attempt to squeeze Russia's finances indirectly.
And militarily. Any support for Ukraine.
Yep. Just on Tuesday, the U.S. approved another $200 million in military aid for Ukraine.
What does that include?
Things like support for drone production, among other items. So the military support continues alongside the diplomacy.
Which ties into what Zelensky keeps saying, right? That Russia will only get serious about peace when the money starts running out.
Precisely. He's been consistent on that point, that economic pressure is key.
So we're seeing this mix. Diplomatic outreach, economic pressure like tariffs, continued military aid, and this looming sanctions deadline. A multi-pronged approach.
Absolutely. But despite all that pressure,
the fundamental problems remain. This war has been going on for, what, 3.5 years now? Since the full invasion.
That's right, 3.5 years. And remember Trump's pre-office claim, end the war in a day.
Seems like a long time ago. His rhetoric towards Moscow has certainly hardened, as the sources say.
Definitely. And past efforts, like those talks in Istanbul.
3 rounds, I think.
Yeah, 3 rounds between Ukraine and Russia. They all failed to really move the needle towards ending the war.
So what are the core sticking points? Why has it been so impossible to find common ground?
Well, a key insight, and this is really central, is that Moscow's demands, their preconditions for peace, are just seen as completely unacceptable to Kyiv and to its Western partners.
These aren't just minor points, then?
Not at all. They go to the heart of Ukraine's sovereignty and future. Russia has a whole list.
Like what?
Okay, so they want Ukraine to be a neutral state, to basically abandon any NATO hopes.
Right, and reduce its military.
Dramatically is the word used. Plus, they demand Ukrainian troops pull out entirely from the 4 regions Russia partly occupies in the southeast.
Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia.
Correct. And demobilize its soldiers.
Wow. Okay, what else?
They want international recognition of Russia's claim to those 4 regions, plus Crimea, which they annexed earlier.
So formal acceptance of the annexations.
Yes. Also, a ban on Ukraine joining any military alliances, limits on the size of its army, making Russian an official language.
It's a long list.
It is. And finally, the lifting of all international sanctions against Russia.
That's a huge set of demands.
Yeah.
It's hard to see Kyiv or the West agreeing to, well, any of that, really.
Exactly. It's seen less as a basis for negotiation and more like terms of surrender.
And it's worth remembering, didn't the Kremlin repeatedly refuse meetings between Putin and Zelensky before?
They did, yeah. Kyiv requested them multiple times and Moscow turned them down. Suggests they have a very specific idea of when and why they want leader-level talks.
So, putting it all together for you, the listener, trying to figure this out, we have these high-level meetings finally on the cards.
After a lot of back and forth and previous letdowns.
Right. But then you stack that against these incredibly far-reaching demands from Russia that seem, frankly, non-negotiable for Ukraine. It creates a real tension, doesn't it? The optics of diplomacy versus the substance of the disagreement.
It really feels less like a negotiation starting and more like one side laying out its terms very starkly.
I think that's a fair assessment based on the sources. We're seeing this complex picture. Diplomatic activity, yes, but underpinned by these incredibly rigid demands and continued fighting.
Leader talks are happening, or at least one is planned, but the fundamental disagreements.
They are immense. The sources really highlight that Russia's conditions aren't just tweaks. They represent a complete political overhaul for Ukraine, essentially demanding capitulation.
Which makes a genuine breakthrough seem, well, extremely difficult without a massive shift from one side or the other.
A radical shift in their basic goals, yeah. That seems to be the core challenge right now.
So thinking about that history, that pattern of hope followed by disappointment, and these incredibly specific, deeply entrenched demands we've just laid out, what do you think is the single biggest hurdle now to actually getting a meaningful breakthrough? And looking ahead, what might it really take to move past these positions?